What if the government sent you a bill tomorrow morning? Imagine opening your front door, reaching into your mailbox, and pulling out an invoice. It has the official seal of the United States Treasury stamped at the top. You scan down to the bottom of the page and there it is. Your share of the national debt is $115,000. And if you are a taxpayer, that number jumps to over $300,000. The number on that imaginary invoice isn't a typo or a prank. It's the real math. Your slice of America's $39.13 trillion tab. That's trillion with a T. The Treasury's own ledger, updated every single day, spells it out. If you divide the entire national debt by the number of people living in the United States, every man, woman, and child is on the hook for about $115,000. For a family of 4, that is nearly $500,000. But if you are a taxpayer, the person actually writing checks to the IRS, your share rockets past $300,000. That is more than most Americans will ever borrow for a house, a college degree, or a business, all stacked on your shoulders by the simple fact of being a citizen. This is not a bill you will ever see in your mailbox. It is a silent claim on your future paychecks, your retirement, and the taxes you pay every year. The number grows with every deficit, every emergency, every political promise. It does not matter if you are rich or struggling to get by, the obligation is real, and it is not just a number on a government spreadsheet. It is an IOU that has been signed in your name, whether you agreed to it or not. Some people shrug it off as just abstract economics, but the Treasury's math is relentless. The debt clock never stops. Every second, the total ticks higher, and so does your share. The question that hangs in the air is this: how does the government actually pay for this? Where does the money come from, day after day, to keep the promises behind that enormous invoice? Each week, the U.S. Treasury faces an unyielding cycle. Bills come due, and to meet them, the Treasury turns to its most flexible tool, the T-bills. These are short-term IOUs, maturing in 1 year or less, designed to bridge the gap between spending and incoming tax revenue. T-bills are sold at a discount, redeemed at face value, and pay no interest along the way. This simplicity makes them a magnet for money market funds, banks, and institutional investors seeking liquidity. As of the latest figures, T-bills account for 21.17% of the federal debt, over $8 trillion in short-term obligations, all set to mature within 12 months. Monday after Monday, the Treasury auctions off new T-bills, using the proceeds to pay off those about to mature. The process is relentless, almost automatic, with old debt replaced by new in a rolling loop. In 2020, the pandemic forced this machine into overdrive. The Treasury issued hundreds of billions in T-bills in days, funding emergency relief and pushing the system to its limits. But this reliance on short-term borrowing carries risk. If investors ever hesitate, the government could face a cash shortfall. The entire system depends on the steady confidence of money market funds and banks, trusting the U.S. will always honor its IOUs. T-bills form the first layer of America's debt structure, a tool for liquidity, but always on borrowed time. The real engine of federal borrowing isn't the weekly scramble for cash, it's the mountain of Treasury notes quietly stacked up behind the scenes. These are the 2-year, 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, and 10-year IOUs that make up more than half of all publicly held debt, accounting for an astonishing 50.95% of the total. T-notes are the backbone that props up everything from Social Security checks to military salaries, highway repairs, and student aid. Unlike T-bills, which are paid back in months, these notes tie the government to obligations that stretch across election cycles and economic downturns. The buyers aren't just Wall Street traders looking for a quick profit. Pension funds, mutual funds, and insurance companies snap up these notes by the trillions, locking in steady returns to cover retirement promises and insurance payouts. When a T-note matures, the Treasury doesn't pay it off and walk away. Instead, it issues new notes to pay back the old ones, rolling over the debt in a never-ending refinancing ladder. During the 2008 financial crisis, the need for medium-term funding surged. The Treasury flooded the market with new notes, pushing their share of federal debt even higher and cementing their role as the government's go-to tool for recurring expenses. Every program that runs year after year, every promise that lasts longer than a single budget, leans on this massive stack of notes. The system depends on a delicate balance, and if investors ever lose their appetite for these longer IOUs, the entire structure could wobble. A 30-year Treasury bond is a promise that reaches well beyond the present, outlasting most careers and even generations. When the Treasury issues one, it is staking the nation's word on a future that stretches to 2056 and beyond. As of 2026, these long-term bonds account for 17.18% of the federal debt, a trillion-dollar segment built on trust that the United States will honor its commitments decades from now. Pension funds, university endowments, and insurance companies depend on these bonds, using them to match their own long-term obligations. The Treasury's quarterly auctions set the rhythm, offering new 20-year and 30-year bonds every 3 months, each one a fresh wager on the country's future strength. Imagine a bond maturing in 2056, passing through the hands of fund managers not yet in the workforce. The government locks in an interest rate, paying out through recessions and recoveries alike. These bonds tie future taxpayers to decisions made today, transforming distant numbers into real, lasting responsibility. Trust is the foundation, and credibility is the currency. There is a special kind of absurdity in a country borrowing money from itself. On paper, it sounds like a magic trick. The left hand hands cash to the right, and everyone pretends the wallet got fatter. That is the heart of intergovernmental debt, a pile of IOUs totaling $7.65 trillion that the United States government owes to its own trust funds, mostly Social Security and Medicare. Here is how the act works. When workers pay payroll taxes, the money flows into these programs. If there's more coming in than going out, the surplus does not just sit in a vault. Instead, the Treasury grabs it, spends it on everything else, and gives the trust fund a special issue. Treasury security, a non-marketable slip of paper that says we owe you. The numbers are jaw-dropping. As of this year, those internal IOUs total nearly $1 in $5 of the entire federal debt. But these are not just monopoly money. When the baby boomers retire and Social Security starts paying out more than it takes in, a moment the trustees now predict will hit in the 2030s, the trust fund will demand its cash back. The Treasury cannot just print a check. It has to find real money, which means selling new marketable debt to the public. Suddenly, what looked like a harmless internal shuffle becomes a very real cash call on the open market. If redemptions spike at the same time as other debts come due, the government faces a timing crunch, forced to borrow more, faster, and possibly at higher interest rates. The clock is ticking, and the IOUs in the government's own pocket are about to become everyone's problem. Beyond the government's own ledgers lies a far more unpredictable force, the foreign backstop. Every month, the U.S. Treasury releases a spreadsheet known as the TIC report, a global scoreboard of who is holding the debt. At the top of the list, Japan holds just over $1 trillion in treasuries, followed closely by China with about $900 billion, and the United Kingdom with roughly $500 billion. These are not just numbers on a chart, they represent leverage insurance and, in moments of crisis, a potential fault line running through the entire financial system. Foreign central banks buy treasuries for safety, to manage their currencies, and to keep their own economies tied to the dollar. But this arrangement is built on trust and mutual self-interest, not on any binding guarantee. When Washington flirted with default during the 2023 debt ceiling standoff, global investors started to ask uncomfortable questions. The so-called X date, the moment when the Treasury would run out of cash, became a countdown watched from Tokyo to Beijing to London. Even the hint of a missed payment sent tremors through bond markets. If a major holder decided to dump even a fraction of its stash, the ripple would be immediate, bond prices would fall, yields would spike, and the cost of borrowing could soar overnight. In a world where foreign accounts own over $7 trillion in U.S. debt, the confidence of these distant creditors is not just a technicality, it is a lifeline. Every Treasury auction depends on their continued faith that America will always pay its bills, no matter the politics, no matter the headlines. Every 12 months, the U.S. Treasury writes a check so massive it could buy every home in a major city just to cover the interest on the national debt. In 2025, that bill topped $1.1 trillion, and there is no sign of it shrinking. This is not money spent on new roads, schools, or research. It is the cost of keeping the lights on, the price of yesterday's promises compounding into tomorrow's obligations. Each time the government pays interest, it does not draw from a pile of savings. Instead, it borrows all over again, selling new bonds to pay the old interest, layering fresh debt on top of the mountain. The hamster wheel spins faster with every turn. Higher debt means bigger interest payments, which demand even more borrowing, which only feeds the cycle. In 2011, Standard & Poor's stripped the U.S. of its AAA rating, a warning shot that rattled global markets and instantly raised borrowing costs. That downgrade was a glimpse of what happens when confidence cracks. From here, the path forks in four directions. Growth outpaces interest and the wheel slows. Inflation erodes the debt's real weight. Politicians finally tighten the belt, or the spiral accelerates, pushing the system toward a breaking point. The debt machine has no natural brakes, only choices and consequences waiting around the next corner. Right now, America owes $39 trillion and pays over $1 trillion a year just in interest. Every new promise is borrowed from the future, and every delay adds to the tab. Debt is not just a number, it is a time bomb counting down in plain sight. What happens when the clock hits zero?